So yeah, hi everyone. Hi again. Thank you very much for joining, and I am really excited to be presenting today. And I'm going to be talking about creating libraries in Angular and building and packaging your libraries, especially with Angular 10. You would see a little bit changes in the way your library would work, or the bundling of your library would work. So let's just jump right in and have a look at how to create Angular libraries. Okay, so as Stephen already introduced a little bit about myself, I am an engineer and I work at the DataWorks. Most of my work revolves around the front-end technologies, Angular, React, and I am a Microsoft MVP and a Google developer expert in web. And I love to write code labs, blog posts around the basic concepts of Angular or web. So when we talk about libraries, right, the basic idea of creating it is about the concept of reusability. And if you're looking for a more standard definition of what libraries are, you would want to go into the programmatic definition of what libraries are. So when I was Googling what is a library as a technical definition, it gives you this standard definition. And it says that in programming, a collection of pre-compiled routines that a program can use is a library. Now, there's a lot of words there. So let's just break it down and understand what it really means and how it is helpful to us for our understanding of, why would we want to create a library using a framework, and why would a program want to use a library, right? And basically, what is the purpose? So it says it's a collection of pre-compiled routines. Now, this gives us a sense that, okay, there's some functionality that can be used repeatedly or maybe across your different projects, and it's pre-compiled. Like the functionality is working, and you can just export it and use it inside your maybe other applications. And so the program can use this pre-compiled routine, pre-compiled feature that is ready for you, and you can maybe share it with other, or just create it and use it in different programs or different projects of yours. Now, the takeaway from here can be that first, your library has some shareable code. You can share it across your projects or with your colleagues. Then it has the reusable functionality, which is obviously the basic idea of creating a functionality. Then the fourth point here says it would have a dedicated code for a feature. Now, for example, you want to implement a virtual scroll for your project. Now, this is a project that has many other functionalities, but then this particular functionality, which is virtual scroll, makes you think that you might need a similar functionality in many different projects of yours, and you don't want to keep it specific to a project. So you think that, okay, let me make it reusable. Let me build it in a way that it becomes reusable, and I should be able to use it in my next application or next project that I'm doing. That's where the concept of libraries start coming in. That's where you start thinking that, okay, what if I just create it reusable, put it somewhere, maybe just for myself, or maybe an internal repository of your organization. Just put it there. Whenever you or anybody wants to use it, can just go ahead and use it. And I always use this example of my own way of working. So I used to work in a setup where we would, like, for example, there are 5 colleagues in our team, and all of us were working on different projects for different clients. Now, one person for a client would be working on a feature. Now, what we would do is, start an efficient way of working, was we would build something, whatever component or functionality that we see can be reused. We would build it as a component, or a library in itself, and then we would just use it and push it onto our internal repository. Now, for example, my next colleague who's working on any other project says that I'm working on a different framework project, and he wants to use the same functionality. He can definitely go ahead and use the different web components that I have created. Now, that's the thing with web components. If you're looking for using your functionality in different framework projects, you can go with custom elements, and we have Angular elements to do that within Angular, right? And if you're tools and components, then you would want to have it inside your Angular project, because you can export Angular libraries and use them only inside your Angular applications. So you can do that in that case. Now, when we understand that reusability is the main idea of creating and using libraries, this picture comes into my mind. And this is a very good example that was shared by, just a minute. So where is my screen? Yeah. So this was a very good example that was shared in this talk, Create and Publish Angular Libraries Like a Pro by Yuri. And in there, he used this picture, which is a very good representation of how our applications comprise of, different JavaScript libraries or different Angular libraries. And all of the code is then assembled to create your whole application. And now, if you reflect and think about your own application, you would see that your application actually uses a lot of different libraries, right? Maybe it's just a regular JavaScript library, or maybe a different Angular library, right? So we, in our projects, use a lot of Angular libraries or JavaScript libraries in general. And then that makes me, come to the point of the use of library and how it really helps us. So this is the definition that, makes justifies the use of library, kind of. So it says it's the smallest set of logically connected code. And as you can see, I've highlighted logically connected code here. And what it really means is that, you would have one feature, one functionality in your library that you want to bundle together and use it as this small set of all the connected code, which is obviously logical enough because it has a purpose. It has this feature that you're trying to export. And this bundle is the thing that you can export and then give to your wherever, whether make it public to NPM repository, or just give it to your colleague, or just keep it to yourself if you want to use it in different projects. So that is kind of, the best use of library, when you're making the bundle very small and just very feature specific, and keeping it or sharing it with anyone. Now, there are different features that a library should have. And we just had Minko talk about Angular, right? So he, in a blog post, shared the different features of a library. And these are some of the features that I'll be talking about now. So he mentioned that a library should be platform independent. Now, what this means is that a library should not just work with our regular Angular project, but it should also work on the server side if you're working on Angular Universal, and it should also work with web workers. This was one feature of, having a library. Then the other feature that a library should have is that it should be bundled and distributed. Now, we understand that well, that our library obviously should be bundled and it should be distributed across projects, or, wherever you want to use it. It should be AOT compilation ready. Now, before AOT was by default, you had to make sure that your library is AOT compilation ready. But with the latest feature of Angular, you already have that, right? So your library always will be AOT compilation ready. And that's when you think that, okay, there are a lot of features, and how do we keep up with all of those when, for example, you are trying to create your own library? And for example, you are a newbie in, maybe you've been working with Angular, but then if you choose to create your own library, this might kind of disappoint you that, okay, there are a lot of features and I need to take care of each and every feature. And that's when you really think that, do I have a proper way of, deciding what format to use, what not to use, what is the best way to go about it, what is the exact architecture that I should use? And that's when Angular package format comes into picture. Now, the Angular team actually prepared a whole document, which is called the Angular package format. And this document it's kind of a guideline to share with you the recommended way of distributing your Angular packages. And if you look at the already existing Angular packages that you use on a regular basis, all of those are created and bundled and packaged as per the Angular package format. Now, it basically means that if you're using the Angular package format to create your own library, this would integrate seamlessly with your Angular application, and you would not have to, since it would follow all the guidelines of your Angular project or the way Angular libraries work. And some of the things that it suggests is that it would create the module definitions for you. It would keep your library AOT ready, and it would create the metadata file for the same. Then it would have the entry point file ready for you. You can obviously configure the entry point file that you have, and we'll look at that a bit later. And it would also create the typing files for you. Now, I've shared this link here in the same slide, which refers you to the Angular package format. And And this is really interesting because this document takes you through all the different, file layouts and the design ways. So I've opened this document here actually. And if you look at it here, you can see that how, the file layout is shared, the different bundle formats are shared in here, whatever you would want to use. For example, it mentions all the different module formats that you would need that your library should, compile to. And there's one very interesting thing in this document, which, yeah. So if you see here, there's this excellent post mention of the post is called the cost of small modules. And you might be really interested in this if you're trying to understand more about the bundling of your library. So I would suggest to read this one. It would also talk about the flat bundles that you would create for your library and the regular bundles also. Moving on. Finally, about creating your library, right? So now that we have understood the different features your library should have and the recommended way of creating a library, what is the file layout that you should follow, all of that, then finally, let's see what is the first step actually that you should take for creating your library. So first of all, you need to make sure that you inline all your styles and templates. Now, whenever you're creating a library and you want to keep a feature, and we mostly have features as per components, right? So let's say there's a module which contains many components, and all these components would have one HTML file, one styling file, then it would have a testing file and the TS file. And you would really want to inline all the styles and templates to make sure that the bundling of your component into the library when you're finally bundling your library is seamless, is very easy for the compiler. And the next step after you have inlined all your templates and the styles is to pass it through the Angular compiler, which is ngc. Now this is the point where the inlining of your templates is very important, because you want the Angular compiler to just take it as a one file which has the all the template for it, HTML for it. It has all the business logic for that and all the styles in there within that one TS file, which is for your component. When you compile it, it generates all the different bundles for your application, and these are the build formats. Now, the first bundle that it should create is the ESM 2015 bundle. Now, we also call it ES6 format. So that's the first kind of bundles that it would generate for you. The second bundle that it should generate for you is ESM5. And that is actually a combination of ES5 and the import export statements from the ES6. So it's kind of a hybrid bundle format. And then there's this third bundle, the build format, which is the UMD format. Now, this universal module definition is actually a combination of CommonJS and AMD, which we used to use earlier. So there's a catch here, actually, which we'll talk about it a bit later. And we also should notice that when we are actually bundling our library, we also get to see some flat bundles. So when we are building our library and going through the demo, we'll see that the ESM5 bundle won't be there after you've switched to Angular 10. And that's a deprecation because the down leveling of your library to ES5 happens after the build. So we'll look at that a bit later. Then you might be wondering that I talked about inlining the templates, I talked about compiling those, I talked about different build formats. I mean, how, you might be totally disappointed about, creating your library, and you might be disheartened that, okay, do I just quit creating a library? What about my, your plan of creating a library? But then ng packager comes to rescue when you're actually, wanting to create your library, but then all of those tasks are, don't seem to be very easy. And ng packager is a project that was done by that was created by David, and it allows your libraries to be built and packaged using this single bundle, a single command. And what it basically does for you to make your task a whole lot easier is that it would create the libraries in the Angular package format. Isn't that the best thing ever? I mean, ng packager makes sure that all of your libraries, whenever you're creating, are created as per the Angular package format. So it follows all the different, whatever guidelines are given in the format document and follows those to create your library. That's one. The second thing it would do is that it would also create all the different bundles for you, which is the ones that we discussed just before the slide, which is the ESM 2015 bundle, the ESM5 bundle, and the UMD. And the third very important thing is that it would also create type definition files for you. So you would not want to, have to separately reinstall the types package, or you would also not want to, specify in environment.ts file, for example. So it would create the type definitions for you. It would create the metadata file, which is for ahead of time compilation. And the best, it would inline all these styles and templates for you. I mean, if you're not use the Angular CLI to inline your templates, or also if you don't want to manually, because who does that? You would definitely want to use the Angular ng packager to inline all the styles and templates. Now, since this does almost everything for our library to be created, this was actually adopted by the Angular CLI, and now it works under the hood, behind the hood, in the CLI, and CLI uses ng packager to create your library. And just like you see the all other commands to create any package, right? For example, ng generate component, ng generate module. Similarly, you can create your library using ng generate library and then the library name. And as we discussed before, the bundles that also will be created for you will be the flag bundles for your each of the bundles ESM5 and ESM 2015. So if you see your bundles as FESM5, FESM 2015, these are the flag bundles with one file, whole code in one file. So that's the another important thing here. Now, if you remember a bit back, I was talking about configuring your ng packager entry file or the destination. Now, this is the place where you have actually defined what your entry file should be and what is the, when you produce your, and when you build your library, what is the destination for that. So the entry file is usually of this name, public API.ts, and you can definitely configure that. And then you have the dist folder, which would have the library, the produced library for you. So that's the first step you can do. And if you look closely into the public API.ts file, it contains all the information of the things that you're trying to expose from your library, be it a module, be it a component, be it a service. So this is very important file because this is kind of the face of your library. This is how the library is interacting with the consuming application. So your public API tells the consuming application that, okay, this library has this module or this component, and you can just use it and get the functionality of this library. And the consuming application then, I'm just trying to show you very step by step as to when we come to the consuming application, you can just use the name of your library and you can import whatever you were exporting from your public TS file. And then in your consuming application, you can simply use the module and you can use the component which you obviously exported from your public API. And this you can use the ES6 import statement to do that. The next step to look at and to understand better is the ng packager way of working. So earlier, your library had one public API TS file, which looked something like this. You were exporting things from here. Then you had all the TS files, which are actually your the logic in your library, whatever library functionality you have. So those are all the TypeScript files. And then you have this package.json file, which is the information about your library. It can contain the name of your library, the version, and the peer dependencies. Now, peer dependencies basically tell the consuming application that this library is compatible with these versions of the dev dependencies, and it works really well if it is integrated with similar versions of the libraries or the packages. Then it goes through ng packager, and what it converts to is the Angular package format, right? And the different files that it creates is the d.ts files, which are the typing files that you need for your library. Then it creates the package.json file, which contains all the information of your produced library, of your built library. And then it creates all the different bundles, the bundles that we just discussed, ESM5, ESM 2015, and the UMD bundles. And like I told you already, that whenever you're trying to create your library, now that the CLI has ng packager working under the hood, you can simply use ng generate library and the library name. And what it basically does is that it runs the ng packager on the files that you have and then build your library. I mean, this is for generating the library, obviously, and it would create the public API ITS file with the configuration mentioned as entry file, which is public API ITS, and so. Now, you might want to, understand the basic structure whenever you're creating your library. So first off, you don't really need to create, an Angular application the general way we do that, the regular way we do that. So if you say ng new application, it just creates the application for you, right? So if you want to just create the workspace, the Angular workspace, but not really have an application, because what you're trying to do is just to create a library, right? So you would just say ng new the name of your application, and then you can just pass the flag create application equals to false. This would create the workspace for you with almost nothing there related to your code, and just contain the basic configuration files. And once you have that done, the next step for you should be to create the library, right? Because inside that workspace currently you don't have anything, but you want to have a library. So the next step for you would be to create a library using the same command, ng generate library. So you can use the value as ngg library as the name of the library. And then as you can see, it is creating inside the projects folder with the name of the library and then the different files inside the library. And once that is done, you would see something like this. So earlier, before you actually created a library, there was just a workspace with node modules and all the other files like gitignore, angular.json, package.json, without anything related to the project. But when you created a library, CLI created a project folder for you, inside which it library for you with the name that you decided for your library. And as you can see, there's one more package.json here. This is not the root package.json, that is different. And then there's other package.json, which is specific to your library, which contains your library information. Like we discussed, it would have the name, the version, and it would have the peer dependencies and similar such fields. So the important thing here to notice is that inside the root package.json, not in the library package.json, but in the root package.json, you need to create, you need to finally build your library, right? For example, at this step, you have created your library and you have all the code written for whatever functionality or whatever feature you are wanting to have in your library. Let's keep it simple for this illustration. And let's say the library feature that we have is just that it should say on the browser that my library works, for example, right? So in that case, the next step for you should be to be able to build your library, because you have the logic complete for that. So to build that, you have this script. You can create any script and it should say ng build and then the name of your library. In my case, the name of my library is technique lib, as you see here. So I just use ng build and technique lib. And I would do that inside the root package.json because I want to create a dist folder for my library, which will contain the produced library. And if you see here, what I do here is I'm trying to run the build of my library. And once I do that, there is some quite important information that we should look at. The first says that we should not publish IV libraries to NPM repositories, and you can read more about that here. Then, as you can see, the first thing that it refers to is the entry point of the library, which is the public API IDS file. Then it goes to the compilation step, and it goes to the different, the different dependencies which are there. Finally, it would start bundling. As you can see here, it's creating the 2015 bundle, the UMD bundle, and it's finally writing the metadata file that is required for your library. And finally, it shows you that, earlier the library was in project technique lib, and it has finally built to a package inside the dist folder, and your library is produced inside that. So this is how it looks now. You have this dist folder inside which you have your library generated. And you can see inside the bundles folder, you would have all the UMD bundles. Then you have the 2015 bundle. But like we talked before, there's no ESM5 bundle. Why is that so? Because this illustration is of Angular 10, right? I'm using Angular 10 version, and we don't have ESM5 here, because like I said, down leveling to ES5 would be done at the end of the build process. So either you down level your project to ES5, and then only you can see the other bundles. Then you might now be confused that there are so many package.json files. There was one at the root folder, there was one at the library level, and then there's one at the disk level, which is the final third package.json file. Now, it's very important to understand that first package.json inside your application was the root package.json. The second was the library specific, which contains the library information. And the third package.json is actually for your produced library, which contains all the information of your finally produced library, which you will be publishing to npm or using it for your as a package for your other applications locally. So when you understand that, the final step for you should be to pack your libraries, because you have generated a library, you've written the code for required for whatever feature you want in your library. The next step was to build your library. We have built our library, and finally we want to pack it and be able to use it inside our other projects, or maybe just give it to just publish it to npm so that the whole world can benefit from what you've done. So the next step for you should be to pack your library. And now packing your library should be done from where you have built it, which is inside the disk folder. So you go to the disk folder and you can just write a script for that. So you go to the build folder inside the library, and then you finally run the command npm pack. Now, if you see here, what this would do is that it would take all the files which are inside the disk folder, and it would create a very small bundle of that. And as you can see, in the end, there's one pgz file which is created. And this is your library package that you have created. This contains the logic with all the TypeScript files, with the public API file, which is exposing your component or module. And if you notice here, the name is actually taken from the package.json of your library, from your library level. The first is the name of the library, which you have specified as the name. We'll look at that. Then the second bit is the version of the library. Now it follows semantic versioning, major, minor, patch. So you can increase it as for that. If you're making any change which is not breaking anything, which is just a minor, fix, you can just increase the patch version 002 and so on. And finally, the extension .pgz. So this is the package that you have created for your library. And now this particular package is to be passed on to wherever you want to use it. For example, a different application, or maybe the app in the similar, the same application with the new application that you will create here, which will be the consuming application. So now let's have a look at the different ways you can use our library, the library that we just created inside an application. And there are three ways of doing it. Either you can just do npm install and give the path to your library package that you just created, the tgz file, or you can simply link to that, not have a reference of it with here, but just link to the library that you're using. And the final thing that you can use is npm pack. So you just pack your library and maybe publish it to npm and install it from there. So now I have created one project inside the same workspace, and let's call it consume library, because you want to consume the library that we just created. And you would see that when you do ng generate application and whatever name you give to your application, it would go to the same folder, which is the project folder. It has one library already in there, but now it creates another folder for you, which is your app folder. It's not a library packet, it's not a library folder, but a application folder, because now you're trying to create an application. So inside that, now you would want to install your library, right? And for that, you will have to use the whole path to your library, which is inside the disk folder and the name of your package, whatever is created. So as you can see here, I'm doing npm install and then the path to my techniquelib001.pgz file, the package. When it adds that, you will get to see that inside the package.json, right, you'll get to see something like this, techniquelib. And then since you're referring to it locally, you would see this file parameter in the beginning before the path of your library. So this basically refers to you that it is, it is extracted, or it is installed as a file, but not from web or anywhere, or maybe from npm, right? So once you have this available in your package.json, this means that you have installed your library from locally somewhere, your application. Now, the next thing for you to check after installing your library is to finally use it. So you go to your app module, you quickly want to check if your library is installed or not, if the typing properly the morning of installing the typing correctly. It won't, because we have used Angular package format and all the typing definitions are being taken care of. So you go to your app module, you simply use import empty curly braces from, and then the name of your library. And then you check when you type some of the component name from your library or the module name, does it give you the suggestions there? And I mean, obviously, if you have the IDE extension for you. So as you can see here, I have the different things that I exported from my public API IDEs file, which is the technique lib component, the module, and the service. So I can import any of those here. And when I do that, the next step for me is to check, to add it to the imports array first of all. So as you can see here in the app module.ts, I have it imported from my library. Then I have added it to the imports array, this technique lib module. Once I've done that, I should be able to use it inside the HTML, see it on the browser, right? So on the right of that, you can see that app.component.html, and I'm using the selector. Now to make sure, remember the selector, just go back to the library folder and check whatever in your inline template for the component that you're trying to use. So in my case, it's lib technique lib. Now, if I run my application, I should be able to see the library, right? So this is my application running here. There's no code in the application. And as you can see in the previous slide, I removed all the HTML from the app component HTML and just referring to the selector of the library, and it just works, right? Yeah. So coming to the next part, which is quite an important part when you're building your library and creating your library, that is about publishing it to NPM, because when you build something cool, why not share it with the world, right? Okay, so when you're trying to publish your library, the first step for you is to log into NPM, first of all. When you have done that, the second thing that you should check is what is the name of your library, what is the version of your library, right? So if you want to read more about semantic versioning and what is the exact pattern followed when versioning your libraries, you should just go to assembware.org and read more about that. And once you have verified the name and version of your library, you can simply publish it with the access flag as public, because you want the whole world to use it, don't we? So first of all, you logged in to NPM with your username and password. Second, as in the first screenshot that you see here, I'm giving the name of my library as technique lib. Then I have the version defined there, 001, since this is the first time I'm creating the library and there's no fixes or no changes. And this is the first time I'm publishing it. So the third thing that you see here is peer dependencies, which are all the dev dependencies required, compatible with your library. And if you try to publish this one, and let's say there already exists a package with the name technique-lib, what would you do? It is already existing, right? So the best way to handle such ways is to do it inside your scope. Now your NPM username is your scope, right? So @Nishu Goel on NPM is my scope. Whatever I install, whatever I publish inside that should be my own file. Even if libraries with same name exist anywhere else, it is under my scope. So I can create @Nishu Goel / whatever library name that I have. In this case, technique-lib. And this should totally work, because now my the package name is not just technique lib, but @Nishu Goel /technique lib. And then the same other fields like version and peer dependencies. Once you have the version and name sorted, you can finally go and publish your library using the simple command npm publish and the access as public. So once you've done that, you should be able to see your library on NPM. And this is what something it would look like if you keep it. And the choice is totally yours if you want to keep it public or private. And yeah, this is kind of done, right? This is how your library is created, and this is how you can build it, use it locally, or just publish it to NPM and then install it in any different project that you want to. But it should be an Angular project since it's an Angular library. And yeah, so I've shared this in two different repositories. The one is for creating a library. Now this tells you all the different ways of what is the pattern to follow, and how you can create all the different files as inline, though they already will be if you're using the CLI, and ng packager would do that for you. But you can take a reference from that. And if you want to then consume the same library either locally or from NPM, then you could go to the second repo that I've shared here, which is for the consuming of the Angular library. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And these are some great resources for you to follow. And I also followed these, and these are great for, if you're building your library. First of all, obviously the documentation. Then there's a great series on series blog actually on the Angular library series, and you might want to refer to that. It goes into detail of every step. For example, the creation step, then the publishing step. It also talks about the bundling of your library with a single command. It talks about ng packager, etc. Then if you're really interested of diving deeper into how Angular libraries work, each and every part about that, then there's this very interesting course about Angular libraries by Fabian Gosbrink. So you might want to check that. And if you just want to create your library step by step, just follow the exact steps as I told you today and create one. Just go to the step-by-step guide to creating your first library in Angular. And this is where I have, specified each and every step and each and every error that I came across when I was creating my first library. So yeah, these are some great resources you might want to have a look at. And I'll share these slides. So yes, thank you very much. That's all.